Here's a question for you, and I don't know if you've been asked this already. Do you think Donald Trump succeeded where Bernie Sanders didn't even try? So to your point about there's a Trump faction of the Republican Party that's breaking off and kind of forming its own third party. There are people on the left that believe that Bernie Sanders should not have ran within the Democratic Party, but probably should have ran as some sort of third party candidate, especially after he lost the nomination.
No, I think it was a necessary decision.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was a great success. Last year's primary campaign. The problem was that eventually all the eggs were put in the electoral basket. I mean, the strategy of the Sanders campaign, as we were repeatedly told, and I think most activists in the campaign believe, was inside-outside, to use popular struggles in the workplace, communities, streets, to help elect candidates, and then those candidates in turn to support and reinforce the mass struggles outside of Congress and electoral politics. But as we saw what happened after the Sanders concession in March, was in fact the strategy was almost totally electoral. I mean, Bernie constantly was coming out with these great ideas, applauding workers who were revolting against unsafe working conditions. But always that was followed by an appeal to contribute to Democratic candidates rather than calling for mass protests. I think one of the greatest failures objectively was to build a movement in support of the healthcare and other essential workers who were working in conditions of great peril and danger. Although groups of Black Lives Matter activists and some DSA chapters and others did support on a local level actions by workers, there was no national campaign, no national coalition. That would have reshaped the nature of the final campaign. Instead, we allowed, in a way, Trump to capture the whole issue of jobs and economic fears, supported by a short-lived but dramatic recovery of jobs during October. So the absence of the protests in the streets and support actions for workers in peril had, I think, very grave consequences. And obviously we should continue to support progressive caucus in Congress. But the focus now needs to be basically non-electoral. I should add to that the fact that, of course, perhaps some of the listeners are thinking, well, hell, the Trump maniacs were out there without, masks. We couldn't do that. We had to stay home and obey the recommendations. But in fact, as Black Lives Matter protests showed, it was quite possible to have mass protests with everybody wearing a mask, and to do that safely. There were various predictions that those protests would become super spreader events.
And they didn't.
Like the Republican protests were, but in no case did that happen because people observed the necessary precautions. We should never give up the street under any condition.
I like that. Never give up the street.
To hear the rest of this show and more, you can find us at This Is Revolution Podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Podbean, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Also, new episodes air every Wednesday on the Zero Books YouTube channel. This is Revolution.